Miranda, welcome to the Visionary Life podcast, where we are spotlighting a series of Bracebridge entrepreneurs right now. So we are so excited to sit down with you. I feel like you have a lot going on in your life and you are just multi-passionate. And we were just chatting in the pre-chat about the animals you have recently adopted and the kids being at home. So I think this is going to be a really fun conversation. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Looking forward to chatting.
Let's get in with some quick fire questions. So first off, where did you grow up and where do you live now?
So I grew up in Bracebridge, just not far from the downtown, just down the hill from Woodchester Villa and the Chapel Gallery. Went to BPS and BMLSS and then moved away to BC for university. And then actually when I was in high school, my parents moved out to Windermere, so like half an hour outside of Bracebridge. And then after university, I moved back and ended up building a house in Windermere. So that's where I am now. But I own a gallery in Bracebridge, so I'm sort of between the two.
When did you find your love of fine art and jewelry and crafting? Has that always been a part of you, or was that something you found into your adulthood? Take us back to when the spark ignited.
I think always, like I was always rearranging my room and wanting to make things for my room and for my dolls. Like when I was a little kid, always pretty creative. Also spent a lot of time outside. I grew up horseback riding and was always at the farm down the road and building things and making things outside too. So that's always been a thing for me. My parents were always very into the arts. My mom did some painting as a hobby, but they were huge. My mom passed away, so it's just my dad now, but like huge collectors of art. And we always went to art shows and galleries. Every trip we went on as a family was sort of, we went to all the galleries, always had to, whether the kids wanted to or not. But yeah, so it was just always part of my life. And I think in high school, I started to really gravitate towards visual art and sculpture and painting. And then at the end of high school, made the decision to apply for post-secondary visual art education. And so that's what I did. I went to Simon Fraser out in Vancouver and did a visual art degree.
Did you know that you wanted to start a business upon graduating from your visual art degree? Or like, what did you imagine life was going to look like when school ended?
I didn't really have a solid plan. Both of my parents, like they were very adamant about us going to school for something that we cared about and were interested in, and they kind of felt like the rest would follow. Both of my older brothers went into sort of more traditional. I both have an interest in art as well, but sort of other avenues, maybe a bit more practical than me. So that's what I was passionate about. So I just kept doing that. And I didn't really have a plan for when I finished school. I could have stayed in Vancouver and applied for jobs in galleries, but then both my parents had some health issues right when I was graduating. So I ended up coming back, and they owned newspaper businesses in the area in Bracebridge. And so I had worked for them for forever. And so after finishing school, I needed a job. So I came back to learn some of the financial stuff with my mom, and then she was diagnosed with leukemia shortly thereafter. So I ended up, like, they had 5 businesses that they ended up selling to Metroland. So it was kind of trial by fire. I did do the due diligence for Metroland, and like with my fine art degree, like, oh yeah, I know everything about accounting, and like talking to corporate accountants. I learned a lot really quickly.
No kidding.
But I was there for like 4 years doing that because my mom was sick for 3.5 years. And then after she passed away and the sale happened all kind of at the same time, I stayed on for a little bit and was like, well, I could stay here working in accounting with my art degree. And I mean, it was one thing when it was my parents' business, but I just, I had this feeling that I just grieving my mom, that I needed to get back to making. And so I, on a whim, looked up the Halliburton School for the Arts and saw that jewelry making was being offered the next term. And so I was like, I'm going to go take that. I'm going to quit my job here at the newspaper and I'm going to go take that. And jewelry was something, it's like I had always been interested in metalworking, but maybe on a larger scale. Like I wanted to learn to weld, but it was just sort of the timing of the program. And I'd always loved jewelry, like always gravitated towards it. My mom and I were both like any craft show or whatever, always looking at the jewelry. So I thought, it's something I'm interested in. I just needed, where my head was at, I needed to dive into something. And I knew that like I needed to be making. And my visual art education had been very conceptual too. So I just really wanted to learn some skills. So that's, just the Halliburton program was kind of a quick and dirty, learn the basic skills. I already kind of had the design conceptual background from my university days that I just was like, I want to go make some stuff and just think about that like really intensely.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. And then after that, I just kept making jewelry.
And that's where it all kicked off. Well, I think, your story is really relatable because I think a lot of people find themselves working in jobs that maybe, they didn't necessarily choose for themselves, but maybe their family kind of pushed them into it. Or maybe it was just a job that was given to them right out of high school or right out of university. And then one day it kind of dawns on you like, do I want to be doing this for the rest of my life? Like, is this my true calling? Is this how I'm going to spend my 9 to 5 for the next 30 or 40 years? And I think that's this weird transition period in a lot of people's lives where either they say, yes, I'm okay with just kind of putting my head down and working the job, even though it sucks the living daylight out of me. Or in your case, it was like, I got to make a change here. And like, I don't exactly know what I'm doing. I don't know what the business is going to look like, but this arts program in Halliburton is calling me and I'm going to go pick up the call and just kind of see where that adventure takes you. So it's just like a good reminder that sometimes those feelings when you're thinking about the future and you don't know what to do, sometimes taking the leap is literally the best thing you can do, and just give yourself permission to go explore what else is out there and to go take that course that's been, nudging at you for a while.
Totally. And I think for me, having a huge life event like my mom dying was I am a risk taker. Obviously, I live my life as an artist, so there's risk involved with that. But it just that sort of perspective shift that I was like, I need to do something that I enjoy doing like right now. And so it was a really good, strong push at that time to just go and do that. And I mean, it all kind of fell into place being in Halliburton. I met some wonderful women. There's like such a great community there who I'm still very close with. And it was just like exactly where I needed to be, like just really wonderful, nurturing people. And and it's such a strong art community there too.
So while you were in school, did you start to formulate an idea of what you would do when you graduate? Or like, when does it all come together that you're like, I'm going to do this as a business?
I think so. Like once I got into it, I was like, I could do this. I still, because I had developed those sort of accounting bookkeeping skills, because I had to, working for my parents, I did have a couple of clients. So I had that safety net of doing that.
Yes.
But on my own terms. And then I started to acquire equipment and build my own sort of home studio in our basement is where I did it. And then I got into a couple of shows, like the Muskoka Arts and Crafts show is a well-known summer show. Hasn't happened for 2 years because of COVID, but I got into that right away. And I had been involved with the organization that organizes that event. And I got into one of a kind quite early, which was super lucky because I'd been told that like jewelry is such a competitive category at a show like that I was told someone had to die for me to get it. Because once you're in, like you don't have to be rejuried. So I got in, and that was a huge boost for me right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely want to circle back on that and like how you got into those trade shows and that. But so let's give the listeners some context, I guess. So when somebody asks you who you are and what you do today, what is your pitch for your business?
Jeez.
No pressure.
It's all so tangled up in like how messy everything is right now, but totally. I feel like in the olden days, pre-pandemic. Well, I make jewelry that has a strong focus in the natural world, and my designs are sort of a stripped down, minimal depiction of natural objects. So it's trees, flowers. I'm trying to think of what else. Ferns. It's a lot of organic material, and yeah, that's been my focus for a while. For me, I dabbled in a lot of different aesthetics, and I just kept coming back to that. I'm a huge gardener. I spend a lot of time hiking. I'm outside all the time, so it just and just everything that's going on environmentally, it just made sense to me to sort of hone in on why I care about the natural world. So that's sort of the majority of my designs are in that vein.
I love that because I'm often working with people who want to start a business and they're kind of always thinking, well, yeah, I want to start my own jewelry line, but what's going to make me unique or what's going to set my jewelry apart, right? And it's often the unique differentiating factor, it's within your passion. It's like, well, who are you and what can you infuse into this industry to make your product unique? And in your case, you're kind of saying, yes, you are very skilled at making jewelry. And then you also have a passion for gardening and nature. And then when you fuse those two together, you become the best jeweler to create pieces that reconnect you with nature and that, depict the scenery around us and the earth. And I just think that's something that is so special about starting a business is that you get to fuse who you are with your talents and your skills and your gifts.
Yeah, definitely. And I think finding those stories within like why I gravitate towards certain plants or that's become a big part of describing my jewelry and telling the story of each piece is finding those. They're often like scientific or just details about specific plants that I find interesting and that also that kind of resonate with human nature as well.
Yeah. And I think we hear all of the time how important storytelling is in building a brand. And I know that is something you are particularly passionate about. And you say that every product you create does have a unique story. So I'm curious, how do you communicate that story properly to your potential customers? Because yes, you know the story, you're the visionary, you're the artist, but how do other people really get into the storytelling of your physical products?
Yeah. Well, for me, because I'm an introvert and I'm definitely not an extrovert. I love writing. And so when I actually the pandemic, this is one of those COVID silver linings, gave me a chance to finally create a proper e-commerce site, which I'm still building, but I have my process all streamlined now. It's just a matter of photographing and writing more, but it gave me a chance to actually sort of narrow down the pieces that fit within that vision and to actually write those stories. And it's made such a huge difference in terms of my own sales, like just that because people can spend that time on my website and read more about the piece that, I was so accustomed to doing trade shows that you're not always going to be able to tell those stories to every person in your booth and like a million times over in eloquent language.
Totally.
You've been there for 14 hours.
You're like, here it is. Do you want it or not?
Yeah. And I'm more of a writer than a talker. So for me to be able to put that down into words and to take the time and to have the photographs alongside it. And then that automatically gave me something to feed into social media, which is something I've struggled with for years because I hate talking about myself.
Yeah.
So I found for me the most effective way is to have that my website and to have taken the time to have written a really thorough, engaging product description. And I've also started printing cards that I include with the pieces when people purchase them. And it's made it a lot easier for people to use for gift giving too, because I often draw parallels between, how a particular tree grows and how we grow in life and sort of those metaphors that go. And so it lends itself to to people choosing a piece of jewelry because of a time in their life or something they're going through.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think like we bond over stories, right? That's like
Yeah.
the oldest form of marketing is just
Yeah.
storytelling. And when we feel a connection to a story, we naturally want to know more or we want to have a piece of it, which is the product, right? So I
Yeah.
think that's really cool. And the other thing I love is that, you acknowledge the fact that you're an introverted business owner, but there are so many ways you can use that superpower as an introvert to write really compelling descriptions and to make those really cool cards that you include in the packages. And just goes to show like you don't have to be extroverted to run a business because both have their drawbacks and both have their perks, right? You may not want to show up on Instagram stories every day, but you have the gift of writing words onto paper. And so, recognizing what it is that are your innate characteristics and how you can maximize that as an entrepreneur, I think is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, like to have the time to go through sort of my collections and write that it's something that was a back burner thing because I was always doing shows, and because I'm a one person business, it was like, oh, I'll get to that, but when? Because I'm always in production for making work for shows, and I had that running list, of like things I should be doing. That'd be really great if I did, but I was like, I don't have the energy or the time. So last year, because I did with no shows, I was able to sort of dive into that, and it was really energizing for me to actually like just such a great exercise to go back and look at specific designs and kind of fall in love with them again and remember why I made them.
Yeah I want to kind of pause on the trade show thing for a while. Do you attribute a lot of your growth in the early days to showing up at these shows and markets?
Yeah, as much as I've done one of a kind for 12 years. Wow. And it's like, I mean, it's the most exhausting because it's
a long, yes.
It's a long haul. Yeah. But there's for me, I find no better way to quickly get your work in front of that many people. Because it's just, social media is one thing, and the different ways that you can try to get more people to see your account, it's not the same as interacting with someone in person and them actually seeing your work. And those are the people, when you meet them in your booth and then they do follow you on social media, those are like the true followers who are going to engage with your content online too. And it was interesting having a year off of shows because I was really burnt out on doing them, because it's like I'm, early 40s, but I'm like, I can't keep doing this. Like, it was fine when I was 28.
Yeah.
And I'm in great shape. It's not that, it's just like packing my vehicle one more time and like just I just had this like, I can't do this forever. It's not. And then also like I should be able to push my business in another direction, but I kept coming back to it because it's so reliable. And just such a great way to find new people. And I also I love talking with the other exhibitors. Like it's sort of also a mini kind of conference for all of us to hash out how our year's been, what's working, what's not working, changes in the market, all of that. So it was, not having one of a kind last year, especially, like that's a huge chunk of my income. And it was interesting. I had a great, because I had built my new website, I had lots of online sales around Christmas is usually my busiest time. And as great as it was to still be home, but it got to be that the number of emails back and forth with people asking questions like, well, how long is this chain? Or where it would have been an exchange of 1 second in person, and then it'd be over days. And then it says your postal code isn't right. And then the packing and the shipping, and because I live out of town, getting to the post office or wherever, and then things getting lost. It's actually, maybe it would just be easier to go to the show, to pack my car and go to the show.
Yeah, I know what you mean, because I used to work in the trade show circuit too. And it's those days are long and they are exhausting, but the benefit is that your customers are right in front of you, and people who
Yeah.
have never tried your product are coming by your booth for the first
Yeah.
time. And there's a very organic connection that happens when
Yeah.
you're just saying hello to someone and would you like to try on my product? And you
Yeah.
said too, like you get to connect with industry peers. It's like all
Yeah.
these other makers and crafters, which is so valuable. Like that's
So
almost
valuable.
half the reason why I love trade shows, was seeing all the other booths and connecting with the other business owners and that. But it's mentally quite draining. It's like, is this a sustainable strategy?
Yeah.
Or will I burn out and start to resent these in-person interactions at trade
Yeah.
shows? Because it's you have to be on for like
You
these
do.
10-hour days, right? But
Yeah.
I feel like it served you obviously quite well in the early
Yeah, for sure.
stages.
For sure. And it was a weird, like the first year that I did one of a kind, I was pregnant with our eldest and he just turned 12. So it's like, I went through some very hard years of like breastfeeding and like having to pump when I was there, or like my husband
Yeah.
and kids came down to Toronto. And then it got to the point when they were sort of old enough that I just would be gone for 2 weeks, or I would come down home for part and like get someone to work for me. And then the past maybe 5 years, I just leave for 2 weeks and I'm gone. And it's kind of my weird holiday.
A weird work holiday, but yeah,
Really
you're getting
weird.
out of your
But
house.
honestly, not having to like to be able to turn off my mom brain and not worry about where the kids need to be and what I'm making for lunches for them.
Exactly.
I actually come back sometimes feeling more well rested, even though, because when I'm there, I have a couple of friends who will work some shifts for me because I always like to enjoy the city when I'm there.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I work the whole day alone. So it's really long days, but I don't know. I also just can focus on my business. Like it's
like CEO time, right? You're still working on your business, but you have all other distractions off and you just focus on like me and my business.
Yeah. And also seeing that many people interact with my work, I come up with so many more ideas and how I want to change things.
Yeah.
It's just like a flood of that. So
yeah. Speaking of that, how do you get ideas, fresh ideas, creative ideas for different pieces or just like new products? Like where does that creativity and inspiration come from?
All over the place. Like sometimes it's very material based. Like I'll be working on one design and then just be playing with shapes and get an idea for something that I try. Or I'm out in the garden and see a particular like leaf pattern, or out in the woods and see sort of a pattern on the water, like, or drops of water. It can kind of come anywhere. I take a lot of weird photos on my phone that won't make any sense to anyone else, but it's more about textures and patterns. And then I often do a lot of research after that if there's something I found in the natural world that I'm just curious about, and often that will spark something. But so it can be anywhere where but it does on occasion happen in the studio too, when I'm working on something else and just like playing with shapes, or I mess something up, but like I melt something in the wrong way and like, oh, that's interesting. Wonder if this could be, So experimentation's big too.
That's so cool. And I think that we all have that ability to like look at a puddle or a leaf and be like, wow, how could I get inspired by that? But I think there's this mindset a lot of people have that's like, I'm just not creative. Like I don't see any inspiration in a leaf and how I could translate that into my business. So do you think that, are we all innately creative, or is that a skill that you have and that you hone in on that other people don't?
No, I think that everyone is creative, like in various ways. Like, I mean, mechanics working on an engine are creative in the ways that they problem solve. And like, I don't know. I think it's just about trying different things with your brain, really. Like people say that to me so much when I'm in my booth. They're like, oh, I'm not creative at all. It's like, I hear that. That's one of the most common comments, but I think they're just looking at it specifically in an art-based context. Then there's just so many other options for creativity. Like, I see that in parenting too. Like I'm a Taurus and I tend to be very organized and like regimented and not that adaptable. So it's like parenting is, I struggle with the creativity of like, but my plan was to do this.
Yes.
And I see other people parenting in such creative ways. So it's like, it doesn't, yeah. I don't buy that when people say it.
I don't either. And I think that is like a mindset block that they need to release. Like when you say, I'm not creative, it's like, well, if you keep saying that, you're definitely not. But if you walked around the earth saying, I am creative, I get inspired, like you'll start to pick up on that and you'll start to see things that you'll never see when you just say, I'm not the creative type. It's like, well, okay, you've decided that already. So I guess that's why you're not getting any inspiration.
Well, and I think sometimes they associate too with like working with their hands.
I think like, so. Yeah.
I mean, no, you probably couldn't make this thing that I made, but there's like the whole 10,000 hours thing that I've done this for a long time. So I bet if you did it for that long, you would do it too. Like there's a lot of work. Like it's, So that that comment never sits well with me. Either.
Yeah, I was chatting with a friend recently, and she has this whole framework and presentation that she gives around the words that we label ourselves with, and how so often people just say the noun. They're like, I'm an engineer or I'm a doctor, but she encourages people to put an adjective in front of it to really uncrack that. So like, say you say I'm an engineer, it's like you're allowed to say I'm a creative engineer, and like take yourself outside of the box. Like just saying you're an engineer, we don't know a lot about that, but like if you pair it with an adjective, like what is that word that describes who you are as an engineer? And so, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but I just love the idea of like allowing yourself to describe yourself in unique ways, rather than just putting yourself in this tiny little box.
Totally.
Yeah. Aside from trade shows, I'm curious, like, especially recently with the pandemic, what have been some of the ways that are working in terms of helping new customers to find you? Like, how are you connecting with prospective customers or clients?
I would say it's mostly been social media and my existing customer base. People were really great about, especially in the early days of the pandemic, about supporting small businesses that they knew that, not that we were struggling, but I mean, I know because my husband's a photographer, when it was like last March, we do maple syrup and we were sitting in the sugar shack and we were like, do we have jobs still? What is this going to be?
I know. Yeah.
So, and like questioning our life choices and all that. But figured we might as well make maple syrup.
I was going to say, couldn't you just make maple syrup full time and call it a day?
We don't have enough trees for that. Oh. It's a lot of work.
Plant a few more. That could be your retirement plan.
Totally. But yeah, I mean, I think social media was huge. Actually, the necklace that I have on this little house, I don't know if you can see it.
Oh yeah.
Making it funny. I made this in April last year. Just based on the idea of being like at home, that we were all at home. And my mom used to have this saying that, like, when I was a kid and I was like, what are we doing today? And are we going anywhere? And she's like, no, we're just going to be plain today.
Plain?
And yeah, we're going to be plain. And that meant we're just going to stay home and, I
love it.
Play in our rooms or read or just have a chill day. And it's funny because I do that with my kids too, not now because we don't go anywhere.
Yeah. Every day is plain day.
But I would do that too. And I was like, they've had a lot of like, they just need a home day, like to just chill out and be plain. But yeah, it was sort of in my mind, I was like thinking about how much we were all stuck at home, and that it just reminded me of my mom saying that it was a chance for all of us to practice being plain and just like chill out. And now I think we're at the point where we've chilled out for long. But anyway, when I made these pendants, it really resonated with people. So I had a huge, I'm so thankful for it, surge. And like, I was making these houses like crazy for months. So it just, again, it was really proved to me about how the story means so much to people. And I have so many people have told me that that wearing the pendant too has brought them a lot of comfort during this time, that reminds them to be thankful that they have a home and a safe place to be. And yeah. But it was a really great boost for me too, because it was at the same time that I was sort of rebuilding my website, and it just, I got a lot of shares and new people, and that was super helpful. And also with the gallery that I have in Bracebridge, I had opened it right before the pandemic started.
Oh yeah. And
Yeah.
how is that going?
Well, it's a joint venture with my dad, because he, as I mentioned, my parents collected art forever, and my dad has continued on with that in his retirement. So we'd always joked with him that he needed to open a gallery because it was just getting out of hand. There's no
Yeah.
space for all the
Yep.
painting. And this building came up in Bracebridge. It's a really cute little old brick house on the main street. And I had always in the back of my head thought maybe I would like a storefront. Couldn't decide because I also love working out in the country and having my private studio here.
Yep.
But just was thinking for growth of my business that it would be great to have like a static place, brick and mortar shop where people could go rather than setting up appointments at my studio and making people drive half an hour out here. Yeah, so this building came up and we went for it, and I opened like right after One of a Kind in 2019, so like a week before Christmas. Wow. And then I was closed until January, and then was open for like all of 6 weeks basically. I guess it was 2 months. Yeah. And then there was a pandemic. So
oh my,
which was crazy. But what I was going to say is that the gallery also was super helpful for me during the pandemic, because I actually was so thankful for having that space when we were allowed to reopen, I guess at the end of May, early June last year, that it brought a lot of people, new people who were interested in fine art into the gallery, and they learned about my work too. So which was funny to me because I've been in the area for so long, and I was like, just assumed that most people knew about my work, which is foolish to assume things like that. But yeah, it's so having that space has been really helpful, but it's also been super stressful because I haven't been able to be open. So
yeah. Okay. So a couple things I want to double tap on there. First of all, I love the story of the House Pendant. And one of the things that I always teach for people who are building a marketing strategy is that you have to create relevance in your content. Like half of marketing is having a relevant message, something that lands with the conversation that's already going on in your consumer's mind. And I think this is the perfect example of that. It's like COVID's happening, we're all at home. And what you did was you saw that as an opportunity to create something that almost piggybacks on this relevant event that everyone can kind of bond over. And then what you did also that's genius is add the storytelling to the sale of the actual physical jewelry. So I just wanted to share that because I think it's brilliant and just such a great way to connect with people and to give them exactly what they want, right? Like regular jewelry maybe wasn't as appealing, but something with a good story that really resonates with this whole stay-at-home order. It was absolutely meeting their needs. So I think
it was the first time that sort of happened. And I also, it was in April, so it was right before Mother's Day. So many like mothers and daughters, and I had people buying like 10 at a time for like all the women in their life. Or I was kind of like, oh, this is what you do. This is how you like, which was, and it's funny because I'm really bad about stuff like that. I was like, I'm capitalizing on a pandemic. And fortunately, my dad is an excellent retired businessman. He's like, just stop it.
I know. I see that sentiment, and I definitely felt a little bit the same way at some points, but it's like, oh wait, but that was not your mentality at all. Like you were just worried people would perceive it that way. I'm just
like, I get like that. I have that voice in the back of my head that I have to be like, that's not why I did it. And
no, exactly.
And it also was just so like at such a time when everything, like my prospects for income last year were like every show I was in was canceled. Like, and I knew I had the gallery, but the gallery was closed. So I'm like, how are we going to make any money this year?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, you did have to launch a new product. It's okay.
Yeah. So it was all good.
Absolutely. And so now with things kind of getting back to normal, what is the plan for the gallery? Like what's the vision there?
Tomorrow, I at first was like, well, I better open today, but I don't.
One more day won't hurt anyone.
Yeah, and also like our kids are still doing school from home, so I'll probably be 3 days a week to start and ease into it. Just
Yeah.
initially, I wanted to have all new work in the gallery and open every day, and I'm like, I can't, that's not realistic. And
No.
no. So I'm going to ease back into it. And I was pleasantly surprised last year, just the number of sales. Like initially the plan was to have just paintings and my work. And then I ended up bringing in some craft just because a lot of my peers, there's no shows. So they were looking for other options. So I have some textile and pottery and metalwork in there as well.
Cool.
But I was just really pleasantly surprised. Like I think the seasonal residents in Muskoka were around a lot more and for a lot longer last year.
Yeah.
And I had people walking by who had gone to pick up like takeout across the road and came in and bought 2 paintings. So
wow.
which I was like, oh, maybe this wasn't a stupid idea. Because it's just, I mean, I know that a gallery is a slow build anyway. Like it's not, going to be a huge money maker immediately, but it just really, it gave me a lot of hope. And a lot of people, it was so lovely to see coming in the gallery, because we have a mix of historical, like there's some original Group of 7 paintings.
Wow.
And there's also contemporary work from local artists and then from other artists like from the GTA area.
Cool.
And just watching people come in and be around art again, they were so appreciative and just like spent so long. And it just felt so nice to see people like really connecting with art. Felt like a public service actually. But
definitely.
Like, they're like, have I been in here too long? I was like, take your time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I have a feeling it will be similar this summer too, that it's just people have missed culture so much, in-person culture.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Even just like the thought of walking into an art gallery right now, I'm like, that feels like a warm hug to me. Like it's just something that we have not been able to do. And we forget how much spaces like that really enrich our life. And, I just think there's nothing that can compare in the online world to what it is to walk into a brick and mortar shop, and especially to like stumble into it when you didn't even know it was there, and then to meet one of the owners, and then to have this experience taking in the art on the walls, and then maybe to walk out with something like I just think that is the best way for people to experience your work and to find products they love. Like there's just something that doesn't translate in the digital world like it does with a true experience where you're face to face with someone. So I'm excited for you to be able to open up the gallery and finally, hopefully have a full year in business where it doesn't shut down.
We had intended, because I opened like right before Christmas, we'd intended to have a grand opening like last May. And I feel like I've like opened and closed and reopened like 5 times since then.
So it will be a grand opening.
Maybe one day we can have a grand reopening.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah. So you obviously wear a lot of hats right now, like with the gallery and with running your online shop, and then obviously with your family. I'm curious, how do you manage your schedule? Like, do you have every minute calculated, or do you just like give yourself grace and go with the flow every day?
Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a bit of a planner, and that's my comfort zone. And I feel like this whole past year and a bit has been an exercise in sort of letting go of that a little bit.
Yeah.
And actually having kids has been an exercise in letting that go a little bit too. But I have sort of given up planning much beyond a few days in advance recently. And also just because my husband's a freelancer too, he may have things that pop up too. So it's at this point, we basically have a meeting every night to say what's tomorrow look like.
Yeah.
And then figure out all the pieces and who needs what when, and do our best. In normal times, I'm like a paper agenda kind of person. I just like to see it. I still use my computer calendar and all of that. And I also have a big whiteboard in the studio now too, so that I can sort of do a brain dump of all the things that I think of when I'm driving, like where I'm like, oh yeah, I have to do that. Oh yeah. So I have like a giant list. that's like all the things. And then my agenda kind of serves as like to streamline what I need to do this week, sort of. I'm a systems person, so I've like dabbled in all kinds of systems. I don't know if they're terribly effective or not, but I feel like right now there's a lot of just like coping and adapting going.
Totally fair. Yes. And I think that's quite normal. I love that you'd still do the paper and pen system too. Like for me,
I
there's
just went
nothing.
back to that like in the past, I don't know, 2 years, because I got to the point where I was using like my Apple calendar, because both my husband and I use it, and I would print out 1 week at a time and then like add in, like use that as, and I was like, I should just get a nice agenda. Because it's very satisfying having a nice little book.
Yeah, especially when you can like cross things off and check things off. There's just nothing that can replace. I still like, I digitize my whole calendar, but I still have like papers all around me with what I need to do and my checklist. It's just, I don't know. There's nothing that can replace that, in my opinion.
No, I agree.
So you say you're kind of like the planning type, but then this year has forced you to kind of like only think a few days in the ahead. So I'm curious, do you have a vision for where your business is going, or are you kind of letting it unfold as each passing month comes by?
I'm more of an let's see how it unfolds, but I often have a like, I don't know if that's the right way to approach it. Like I have that like, maybe I should sit down, every January and have a real like, where do I want to be at the end of this year? But it never seems to happen that way. And I also like I feel like it's my year kind of has the ebbs and flows. Like I work till Christmas or just after Christmas, and then January I have those plans like, oh, I should sit down and have like envision where I'll be at, but I'm always burnt out in January, and I just want to like go skiing in the woods.
I hear ya. And you know what? The reason why sometimes I ask that question is because I want to showcase the fact that not all business owners have this like master calculated plan. Like sometimes we do just honor that, this season I'm just going to go with the flow. And then maybe next year I'll write a master plan and it probably won't come true. So I'll adapt it. And it just goes to show that like, we don't have it all figured out, and that's okay. You can still have success and you can still do what you love without having this 40-year vision written out in some master Bible somewhere.
Yeah. I tried to do a business plan at one point, and I followed along with a few different formats, and even one that was geared towards creatives, but I just like, it kept occurring to me that a lot of it, like I'm a one-person show here. So I get the problem with being a planner and liking to be organized is that I get caught up in the minutia of the like systems and like making sure everything, like I have a recipe book for my my designs that I follow, and I like will get really into really organizing that, and then I'm like, is this the time I spent on that, seeing as it's just for me, is it really going to benefit me, or is it just that I like it to be nice and tiny?
Totally.
You know what I mean? Like you could pour it, and I was like, wow, I haven't made any jewelry in 2 weeks.
And that's the balance of like, okay, you are the creator and the artist, but you're also the admin, you're the marketing, you're the sales. And it's like having that balance. And at some point you have to say, where can I best spend my time today?
Yes. Well, and I actually had a business mentor at one point, and he was like, Miranda, I don't think you need to do a business plan, because it was like another project for me that took me away from my actual work.
You're like,
and it was like just looking at the benefits, like the return on the investment of time. That was like, I mean, broad strokes, yes, it's good to have sort of a plan and goals, but getting into like the minutia of a classic business plan when I'm not going to have employees necessarily right away, or maybe never. I don't need to write a handbook.
You don't need to write a handbook. Exactly. The handbook's in your head right now. And maybe one day when you have a team, you'll have to get that handbook out onto paper, but you're right. Like just stay in your craft right now. Keep the joy associated with business rather than making process on document on, list. And, sometimes that can actually reduce the amount of fun that you're having because you feel like you have to do all this back end stuff, and it takes you away from the whole reason why you got into business in the first place.
Yeah, totally. And even sometimes with social media, like where I'm like, I should make a schedule about posting, and then for me, it's like I'm not excited about those things that I'm posting about. It just
Totally, because it's
takes that.
not in the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's shift gears into some Bracebridge specific questions. So I'd love to know, why do you love Bracebridge? Like, what is it about this small town that just really clicks with you?
I think for me, and I don't know, it may be because there's a level of familiarity having grown up there. I feel so comfortable there. Like it's such a sweet little town. And I love the sort of historic aspects of it, like the old buildings and on the streets adjacent to the downtown and also the main street. It's just, I don't know. Aesthetically, I really love it.
Yeah, that's perfect. What advice would you have for somebody looking to start or grow a business in a smaller town?
I think it's the networking piece. Like for me in the early days, like the word of mouth and, my elementary school teachers who all bought work from me and my, aunts and uncles and all those people. I think that's such a important way to start with those, those people close to you. And just if you're moving to a small town to start a new business, is getting to know the people, and because word of mouth is, you can't really beat that, especially in the early days. Like, yeah.
Good advice. And final question, what's your favorite place or space in Bracebridge, whether it's a store, a nature spot, or a place we've never heard of before? One suggestion, or maybe two.
I think I would just straight up go with the falls, like the river and the falls. Because where I grew up was just sort of up the hill from there, and we always walked on the trails and like the little bridge, you can go right over the falls. And you can get such close access to the water there, and it's just so beautiful. Yeah. So I think, I love the whole downtown, but that's pretty special that's right in the downtown.
Yeah. And for people who are going to be coming to Bracebridge this summer, or maybe they want to shop your work online, tell them all of the places where they can connect with you, find you, and say hello.
Okay. So my website, which is mirandabritton.com, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and the gallery is brittongallery.ca, and it's on the main street in Bracebridge.
Perfect. Can't miss it.
Location, 169 Manitoba. Yeah.
So good. We will link all of that in the show notes so that people can go check you out and definitely go scope out your amazing work. Instagram is a great platform to go creep all of the pieces that you have. So Miranda, thank you so much for coming on the show and just sharing so openly and authentically. We appreciate you and wish you all of the best for this season.
Amazing. Thank you. It was fun chatting with you.